Greetings, it's Jurgis. Hopefully you guys are doing well. This is my dog Maxwell. He tends to want to be in my lap. He's a Boston Terrier, a big Boston Terrier, who wants to be in my lap as I read, so he'll be laying down soon. Can you lay down, Max? Lay down, buddy. Lay down. Lay down, Max. Good boy. So you'll see his ears. So we're on to letter 8 of Saint Theophan, the Recluse, the Spiritual Life. This is normally where I normally read in the evening. A little bright outside. Got a kitten in this room too, so if you see things happening while I'm reading, I ask that you bear with me, and let's continue. Letter 8, the heart and the aspect of sense. The sensual aspect, the heart. Who is not aware of the great significance the heart has in our lives? Everything which enters the soul from the outside and which is shaped by the intellectual and active aspect falls into the heart. Everything which the soul observes on the outside also passes through the heart. That is why it is called the center of life. The heart's occupation is to sense everything concerning our person. It constantly and persistently senses the condition of the soul and body, and along with this, the various impressions from the individual actions of the soul and body, from surrounding objects which it encounters, from the outward situation, and in general from the course of life, thereby compelling and forcing man to furnish everything which is pleasant to it, and to avoid the unpleasant. The health and disease of the body, its vivacity and languor, fatigue and strength, liveliness and lethargy, along with what has been seen, heard, felt, smelled, tasted, and what has been recalled and imagined, what has been done, what one does and intends to do, what has been obtained and is being obtained, what may or may not have been attained, what is favorable to us or unfavorable, whether having to do with the person or concurrence of circumstances. All of this is reflected in the heart and affects it whether pleasantly or unpleasantly. Judging by this, it is impossible for it to be at rest for even a moment. Instead, it is in a constant state of disturbance and flux, just like a barometer before a storm. But there is much that it senses that passes through without leaving a trace. This you may verify from instances when we happen to be somewhere for the first time. Everything in that place occupies our attention, but after the second or third time in that place, this is no longer so. Every influence on the heart produces a unique feeling within it, but there are no words in our language for distinguishing these feelings. We express our feelings in general terms: pleasant, unpleasant, like, dislike, happy, bored, joy, grief, sorrow, pleasure, calm, anxiety, disappointment, satisfaction, fear, hope, apathy, sympathy. Observe yourself, and you will find first one feeling in the heart, then the other. However, the significance of the heart in the economy of our life is not just to be passively subject to impressions and to a test as to the satisfaction or dissatisfaction with our condition. The heart also maintains the energy of all power of soul and body. Look how quickly something is accomplished when we have our heart in it. But when our heart is not in it, our hands drop and our legs do not move. That is why only those who know how to control themselves when they have encountered something which must be done, even if their heart is not in it, rush to find a pleasant side to it, and having reconciled their heart to it, maintain within themselves the energy necessary to accomplish the task. Zeal, the motive force of the will, comes from the heart. This is also the case in mental work. A subject that has come to heart is discussed urgently and from every angle. In this case, thoughts occur by themselves, and work, no matter how long it takes, does not seem like work. Not everyone likes everything, and not everyone has his heart equally in the same things. Rather, some like one thing more, while others like something else. This comes about in this way. Each person has his own taste. This depends in part on his natural predisposition, and in part, is this not the greater part, on first impressions. Impressions from his upbringing and happenstances of life. But no matter how tastes have formed, they compel a person to order his life in such a way as to surround himself with such objects and interrelationships as show his taste, and with which he is peaceful, being satisfied by them. The satisfaction of his heart's desire gives him calm, sweet calm, which also constitutes its own measure for every happiness. Nothing disturbs him. This is happiness. If a person were to always maintain sobriety in his mental part and prudence in his actions, then he would meet in life only the smallest number of occurrences unpleasant to his heart, and accordingly would have a greater portion of happiness. But, as has been explained, the mental part rarely maintains itself worthily, giving itself over to idle dreams and distractions, while the active part deviates from its normal bent, being enticed by inconstant desires, which are aroused not by needs of nature, but by alien passions. That is why the heart has no rest. And as long as these aspects are in such a state, it will not have any. The passions more than anything tyrannize the heart. If there were no passions, it would still meet with unpleasant things, of course, but they would never torment the heart in the same way the passions do. How anger consumes the heart, how hatred tears it, how evil envy grinds, how many disturbances and torments cause discontent or disgraceful conceit. How heavy lies grief when pride suffers. Indeed, if we were to examine a little more stringently, we would find that every one of our disturbances and pains of the heart are from the passions. These evil passions, when they are satisfied, give joy, but it is short-lived. And when they are not satisfied, but on the contrary meet with opposition, then they give rise to long and unbearable grief. In this way, it is apparent that our heart really is the root and center of life. By informing as to the good or bad state of a person, the heart rouses to action other forces, and then receives back into itself the actions of these forces, thereby intensifying or weakening that feeling, by which the person's state is determined. It would seem that the heart should be given complete power over even the running of one's life, as is indeed the case for many people. For many, it has complete control, while for everyone else, it has at least some. So it would seem. And maybe that was its original natural function. But the passions arose and stirred up everything. In the presence of the passions, even our state is not reliably indicated by the heart. And impressions are not such as they should be. And tastes are distorted. And disturbances of other forces are headed in the wrong direction. That is why we presently have the rule of restraining our hearts and subjecting their feelings, desires, and inclinations to strict criticism. If someone should be cleansed of the passions, let him give the heart its will. But as long as the passions are enforced, to give the heart its will would mean to patently doom oneself to every sort of uncertainty. Worst of all is the behavior of those whose goal in life is to supply sweet pleasures to the heart, and who aspire, as they say, to the good life. Since sweet desires and cardinal and sensual pleasures make themselves strongly felt, such people are always falling into coarse sensuality, and they are beneath the feature which distinguishes man from other living creatures. There is a soul and noetic life for you, from every one of its aspects. I purposely pointed out what is natural and proper for each aspect, and what is not. I see without reminding you a readiness within you to follow the former and shun the latter. Lord, give the blessing. Letter 9, Spiritual Life. You write, I tried to keep my thoughts on something substantial, but could not do it at all. I thought this was because I was unaccustomed to thinking. So I got a good book, hoping that with its help, I would be able to keep my mind in the proper frame, but the result was the same. My mind always got sidetracked, and always by trifling things. One day I sank into a reverie. Was there ever a time when I have not done this? A friend brought me out of it by asking, what are you thinking about? But I was not thinking. I was daydreaming. That is how it has always been. But I never paid attention to it before. Now I see, and I see that this should not be the case. But just how should it be? I will never be able to control my thoughts. I shall tell you how it should be later. But now I will ask you to add something to the observations you have made. Try for a single day to go without anger and vexation, and tell me how you manage. Then you asked me a question. You concluded, there is a soul and noetic life for you, but you have not shown everything in the soul. You have not mentioned the virtues or anything about devotion, not a single word. But I see in our family, in our relatives, and in many acquaintances how these things occupy first place, not only in word, but also in deed. How could they go without mention? I intended just now to write about this. I even wanted to say last time that I would write about this in this letter, but I thought it over and decided to wait and see how you would react to all that was said. So here's your question. I want to thank you for your serious consideration of what I've suggested. This is indeed worthy of your well-formed little mind. What seemed to you to be an omission would have been entirely out of place. It is not the purpose of the soul to deal with such things. It is the purpose of the spirit. While the soul is exclusively devoted to the structuring of our temporal, that is, earthly existence, and its knowledge is entirely built only on the foundation of that which gives experience, and its activities devoted to the gratification of the needs of the temporal life, and its senses are engendered and persists only from its visible states and condition. Anything that is above this does not concern it. To be sure, some things occur in it which are above what has been said, but they are guests which drop in from the high realm, the realm of the spirit. Just what is the spirit? It is that force which God breathed into man when he created him. The earth bore all the species of earthly creatures by God's command. From the earth also came every kind of living creature soul. The human soul, although it resembles the animal soul in its lowest part, is comparably superior to it in its higher part. That it is this way in man is because of the bonding with the soul. The spirit, breathed by God, combined with it and raised it far above every non-human soul. That is why we note within ourselves, in addition to what we see in the animals, that which is peculiar to the spiritualized soul of man, and even higher, that which is peculiar only to the spirit. The spirit, as a force which has come from God, knows God, seeks God, and in him alone finds rest. With a certain innermost spiritual feeling attesting to its coming from God, the spirit feels its complete dependence on him and acknowledges itself as obliged to pleasing God in everything and living only for him and by him. More precise manifestations of these movements of the life of the spirit are: 1. The fear of God. All people, no matter what degree of development they are, know that there is a supreme being, God, who created everything, maintains everything, and rules everything, and that they depend on him in everything, that they must please him, that he is a judge and requitor who gives to everyone according to his deeds. Such is the natural credo, which is inscribed in the spirit. By confessing it, the spirit venerates God and is filled with the fear of God. 2. The conscience. Acknowledging itself to be obliged to please God, the soul would not know how to satisfy this obligation if the conscience did not rule it in this area. After imparting to the soul a particle of his omniscience in the natural credo he established, God inscribed in it the requirements of his holiness, truths, benevolence, having entrusted the soul itself to observe the implementation of them and to be its own judge as to right and wrong. This aspect of the soul is the conscience, which indicates what is right and wrong, what is pleasing to God and what is displeasing, what should be done and what should not. Once it has indicated these things, it must authoritatively carry them out, and then reward implementation with comforting and punish non-implementations with remorse. The conscience is a legislator, the guardian of the law, the judge, and the executor. It is the natural codex of God's commandment, which are encumbered on all people. We see the action of the conscience along with the fear of God in all people. 3. The longing for God. This is expressed in the universal yearning for the supreme good and is more clearly seen also in the universal dissatisfaction with everything created. What does this satisfaction signify? It signifies that nothing created is capable of satisfying the spirit. The spirit comes from God. It seeks God. It wants to taste him, and abiding in the living communion and bond with him, it rests in him. When it attains this, it is at peace. And until it has attained this, it cannot have peace. No matter how many creature comforts and blessing a person has, he has very little. Everyone, as you've already noticed, is always seeking. They seek and find something, but after they have found it, they cast it aside and start seeking all over again, so that they may once again cast away what they find. So it goes on endlessly. This means that they are seeking the wrong thing in the wrong place, and not what they should be seeking, and not where they should be seeking it. Isn't this tangible proof that there is a force in us drawing us away from the earth and earthly sorrows toward heaven? I'm not giving you a detailed explanation of all these manifestations of the Spirit. I'm just directing your thoughts toward the Spirit's presence in us and ask you to think it over a little more to convince yourself fully that there is a Spirit within us. For the distinguishing feature of man is within it. The human soul makes us a little above the animals, while the Spirit makes us a little below the angels. You, of course, understand the sense of the various phrases we have, such as the spirit of the writer and the spirit of the people, and so forth. It is the sum total of distinguishing characteristics, actual ones, but to some extent ideal ones, with the sense of being ascertainable, elusive, and intangible. The human spirit, in the same way, the spirit of the writer, on the other hand, is seen purely as something which is idolized, while the human spirit is present within a person as a living force, with variable and sensual movements attesting to his presence. From what has been said, I hope you will come to the following conclusion. A person in whom there is no motion and action of spirit does not stand on the level of human dignity. Letter 10. Faith in the existence of God. You ask, how can you say that everyone has a spirit with the manifestations you mentioned? Also, are there not peoples who do not know God? These peoples do not know the true God, but they do know he exists. Everyone confesses this, believing there is a God, and wishing to define more precisely that he exists. They have gone astray and call God that which is not God. Some call the sun God, others the moon or stars. Others say something else. Not everyone, however, has strayed so grossly. When God scattered the peoples on the face of the earth after the Tower of Babel, they carried with them what were up to that time traditional, sensible concepts of God, as the invisible spirit, creator, providence, judge, and requitor. All hold him to be the creator, providence, and requitor, but not all hold him to be the immaterial spirit. Instead, they change the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. Romans 1:23. When they knew God, that is, knew that God exists, they glorified him not as God. Romans 1:21. Of the Eastern peoples, the Persians and Indians, both Asian and American, have the most elevated concept of God. The Greeks and Romans belittled God, so to speak. The American Indians, for example, called God the universal spirit, invisible, all-embracing. This is a very lofty notion, and in and of itself, it cannot be carried further than this. The Asian Indians went deeper in their comprehension of God, but after maintaining the concept of his invisibility, all-powerfulness, and activity in everything, they intended to define his creative and industrious activities more precisely and came up with a lot of concepts that had no foundation and wrote a lot of fantastic stories. So it is in this sense that there are people who do not know God, not in a sense that there are people who do not believe in the existence of God. Some travelers have claimed that they have encountered peoples who did not know God at all and did not venerate him. Most likely, they just did not hear a confession of faith or see any worship of God. And in order to have ascertained one way or the other, they should have stayed among the people longer. Becker, in our own day, lived for an entire month among such a people near a lake through which the Nile flows. He says he saw no worship of any deity until the new moon came, when he saw the king and all the elders preparing a bull. The designated day arrived, and they went to some hilltop, leading the bull to the sacrifice. If I had left 2 or 3 days earlier, says Becker, I could have said, in all sincerity, that this people does not worship God. Thus, put entirely out of your mind the idea that there are people who do not acknowledge the existence of God. There are some scientists who think they can do without God, and who talk and write books as if he did not exist, but while their tongues and pens weave such empty words, their hearts say something else. They make themselves out to be non-believers, but very uncertainly, so as to successfully get away with it in their own conscience. Knowing God, everyone has a conscience, honors God, and prays to him, and believes in the future life, in which everyone will receive according to his deeds. The Spirit is a force that sustains all such belief and convictions. We will assume that within each person is a spirit, the highest aspect of human life. It is the force that draws that person from the visible to the invisible, the temporal to the eternal, from the creation to the creator. It is a characteristic of man that distinguishes him from all other living creatures on earth. It is possible to weaken this force to varying degrees or to prevent its requirements, but it is not possible to utterly suppress it or annihilate it. It is an integral part of our human nature and manifests itself in each person in its own way. You led me to speak in this way by your question. No harm done. I wanted to write to you anyways, not about this, but about what happened and what happens in the soul from the influence of the Spirit by its binding with our soul. That will be for next time. Well, I think we'll stop there. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Hopefully Maxwell didn't make too much noise. You're all right, Max. Say goodbye. Make too much noise snoring or breathing away. He likes being on my lap. Well, this is pretty deep. This is pretty beautiful. The depth is beautiful. I appreciate St. Theophan very much, and I hope that you're getting something from this as well. And we'll talk to you on the next Orthodox Gardener.